easy way out, and they say, oh, it's just that person who won't work. It's just that welfare queen with 5 kids, and she won't work, and she's why the budget isn't balanced. Well, do we have to reform welfare? Yes, but you cut that person off and all the people, and you still don't balance the budget. You don't get anywhere close to balancing the budget. If you look at it truthfully, if you want to know where the welfare spending is going, there is more corporate welfare in Washington than welfare going to poor people. You have to look at welfare across the board and not define it as just the poor person. There is welfare, corporate welfare, across the board. The other thing you have to say is the Democrats will sometimes say, well, we need to keep the person on welfare, no limits, forever and ever, but we could cut the military budget. The truth of the matter is you have to do both. You have to look at the budget across the board. 40% of the budget is the military budget. We have to start by saying all military spending is not for national defense. We have to define what national defense is. The Grace Commission 40 years ago, or 20 years ago now, talked about $500 hammers and $100 wrenches in the waste. That waste goes on. In Iraq, we gave a $1 billion no-bid contract to Halliburton. What do? What's the first thing they do before they get started? They hire a lobbyist. He gets $1 million, or she gets $1 million. What does she do? She goes back to Washington as soon as they get the contract, and he or she holds the hand out and says, please, sir, can I have some more, sir? It's what it's all about. I propose one thing that we can do to reform all of finances. Money does corrupt politics, and McCain-Feingold recognized that, but they went about it in the wrong way. McCain-Feingold made it illegal for my taxpayer group to buy advertising. That is un-American, against the First Amendment, and atrocious. Within 60 days of the election, I cannot buy an ad criticizing my congressman for his votes. Illegal in America. They tell me paid speech is different than the speech that the newspaper has. But the newspaper's editorial board, they had to pay for a printing press. They've got to pay to print the newspaper. How is that not just paid political speech also? They get to use their presses, but I can't even buy to use their presses. There is a way to reform campaign finance, though. I say make it part of a contract. When you sign up to get a federal contract, I say if the contract is for more than $1 million, we make a clause in the contract. This isn't something they have to do. They only have to do it if they want the money, if they want the contract. You make a clause in the contract saying, I agree not to lobby Congress during the terms of my contract. I think that is a contractual arrangement and doesn't infringe on the First Amendment. I think there are ways you can also add to the contract and say that while the terms of my contract I'm receiving this amount of money from government, I agree not to contribute to PACs that contribute to candidates, and I won't directly contribute to candidates. Now there's some details you have to work out on that contract, but there is a way to say, and what my point is here is that if we get beyond a Republican primary, these are issues that appeal to independents and moderates and other people because it's about good government. And there are ways to reform government that appeal to a lot of people beyond our crowd or the limited government crowd or the Republican Party. So there are ways that our message can be very appealing in a general election that I think we can do very well. The other thing we have going for us is that we have to win a primary in the beginning, but the Republican primary in Kentucky will have about 100,000 voters. That's not many. That's a small number of people for a Senate seat. You contrast that with most states like California or New York where it's millions of people and you can't even run in California without $50 million. I think we can run a credible race in Kentucky with $2 million in the primary. Probably need another 5 to 7 in the fall. But $2 million will get you press and will get you in the news in a primary. The other thing about a primary of 100,000 is if it's a 3 or 4-way race, you might win with 30,000 votes. I know people out there, I've met a lot of you before, I know how hard you will work and how you really believe. Most of the other people don't have true believers. They might want to support somebody because they might get a federal contract, or they might get to shake their hand at a big ball with a black tie affair and that kind of thing, but they don't believe in anything. We believe in something, and I think we're motivated enough that we go out and knock on doors. I've seen people, you guys hand out videos about the government, what the government's doing. You guys are motivated. You go out and work hard for someone you believe in. We could win a primary in Kentucky. One thing I'd like to close with is some good news. My dad's been in Washington for 30 years, and you know what? He hadn't gotten many pieces of legislation passed. But the one good thing, some people said, oh, we lost, and if we'd just done this, we could have won. I'm not sure there was anything we could have done to win, to tell you the truth. But I think we did win in one way. Those of us who have felt disenfranchised, that we didn't have a representative from either party that ever said something that we could agree with, we now have a national spokesman who routinely, on a day-to-day basis, is interviewed by the mainstream media and does get our viewpoint out. And for the first time, he's going to have a piece of legislation, if they don't change it, that will be something that we can all get behind, and that's audit the Fed. This thing has a lot of momentum. 175 co-sponsors the last time I looked. If you get 218, they can't even stop you. It's called a discharge position and it has to be voted on. But I don't even think we're going to need 218. Barney Frank is the chairman of the committee that it goes before, and he's agreed to have a hearing. It hasn't been scheduled. I've talked to people on my dad's staff. They say if it passes the committee, they think it'll pass the House. I think you can see it in the eyes of Bernanke. When he comes before the committee, the last time my dad grilled him, it was amazing. You could see in his eyes, they're concerned there could be limitations for the first time placed on the Federal Reserve. Most people in the mainstream media have no idea that the Federal Reserve has increased its asset sheet by $2 trillion. We're all complaining about the $1 trillion of the Obama stimulus plan and the $1 billion of the bank bailout that the Republicans and Democrats did together. But there's another $2 trillion that was just created on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve with no authority of the people, no vote by Congress, and no consent. That is an abomination and has to change. I think there will be a vote, and I think this is a huge step forward, and we'll see what happens with this. But that's due to a lot of people out there. I don't think Alan Brown's here today, but from Bardstown, his family, he came down to Bowling Green to something we had recently, brought 53 petitions to give to our local congressman. And I don't know if he was the tipping point, but 1 or 2 days later, our local congressman in Bowling Green signed on to audit the Fed bill. I was in Minneapolis recently. They turned in 400 petitions to their local congressman's office. And most of the time you don't get to meet the congressman, but it does have an impact. The woman in the office said they had never, ever in 20 years received any petitions. You get those national things, you know, these internet things, and I don't think they pay as much attention to those because they know they're real easy to generate. But someone who actually printed a petition, got 50 or 100 of their friends to sign, showed up at the congressional office and turned it in, it makes a difference. They see an impact of people who are concerned about this, and it's not the final cure, but it is a step in the right direction. And I want to thank everybody out there for everything you've done for House Bill 1207. One final word on the specifics of what I'm doing. We formed what's called an Exploratory Committee. We have a website, randpaul2010.com, and we're beginning to raise money. It's not an absolute that we've declared for office. We are still sort of in this limbo land of seeing what happens with Jim Bunning. It's very hard to beat an incumbent. And there are some things that Bunning has done right. He did vote against the bank bailout and has been conservative on many fronts. We're not sure what's going to happen, but I'm having more and more trouble meeting any Republican in Kentucky who believes he's running. He's now told another candidate from Northern Kentucky, the same area, the same group of people, that, oh yeah, go ahead and form an exploratory committee, I don't care. But he's also said he won't run if he doesn't raise the money, and he's struggling raising money. If you're struggling to raise money, why would you else to run that's going to compete with you for funds? Something doesn't add up. A lot of people think that he's just not going to run. There'll be another report in another month and it may not happen. We're laying the foundation because we think there will be a race. I'm fairly well convinced there will be a race, but we're calling it an exploratory committee in the beginning to try to raise enough money to show people that we can put on a credible campaign. Not only do we have our website, I've already scheduled a trip to Texas for fundraising, Florida for fundraising, California for fundraising, and New York City for fundraising. anything you can do to spread the word, write letters to the editor, get on our website, anything you can do to generate traffic or help me in this, I would appreciate it. Thank you for having me.